The Zelda series is a mysterious one. While it is a series which players can be introduced to at any point in its chronology, having a general understanding of how Zelda works will give you, dear viewer, a better idea of what sort of problem this guy is facing. And boy, is it the dilemma. You can also think of this video as a sort of Zelda glossary that will catch you up to speed on what's going on as the Link and Zelda from Breath of the Wild enter into Tears of the Kingdom. Long ago, actually, before these three, there were these three. The goddesses Din, Nehru, and Faerore. They respectively created the Earth, that was Din. Nehru made the properties and physics of Hyrule. The game calls this the law or rules of the land. And the people who live in this land were made by Faerore. Anytime the goddesses are spoken about plurally, we are referring to these three specific celestial beings. There is a singular goddess named Hylia. Whenever we refer to the goddess, we are referring to Hylia specifically. I'll say more about her soon. After the goddesses created Hyrule and the Hylians, the people of Hyrule, they ascended into the heavens. The physical location at which they ascended left a sacred relic, known as the Triforce, in its wake. This sacred relic is what gives Hyrule its providence, and it happens to exist in a parallel dimension known as the Sacred Realm. And I just want to mention here that the Triforce is typically found within the Sacred Realm. However, the Link from Skyward Sword discovers it in what is known as the Silent Realm, which may not be the same as the Sacred Realm. But that's a topic to debate for another time. Due to the events which occurred sometime before the events that take place in Skyward Sword, a last bastion for Hylians known as Skyloft was built, and then later on, because of the demon invasion led by this guy, Skyloft was erected to exist near the Triforce's location, waiting for someone who is tempered in strength, wisdom, and courage to be able to claim it. Because you see, if someone is not tempered in all three of these qualities and attempts to acquire the relic, the Triforce will split, and a third of the Triforce will go to any individual who best embodies the virtues of power, wisdom, and courage. All of this was set in motion to protect the Triforce because, as with almost every Zelda game, the possession of the Triforce is typically the primary source of conflict for that game. It's a source of conflict because the Triforce can make any wish a reality. How does it do this? The Triforce can make any wish a reality because it is the point where the three goddesses ascended from Hyrule. This point connects Hyrule to the heavens, so to speak. When someone possessing the three virtues of power, wisdom, and courage touches that relic, no matter if that person is a good or a bad person, they are able to tap into the creative order of the goddesses. This person who has proven themselves and who touches the Triforce and makes their intent known is able to tap into the omnipotence of the three goddesses. They can, quite literally, speak reality into existence, bending the laws of reality to their will. This can be witnessed when King Daphnis of Wind Waker wishes for hope for Link and Terra, Zelda's reincarnation in the adult timeline, as well as for Hyrule to be washed away. Once Ganondorf is defeated in this timeline, we see the two enveloped in oxygen bubbles, and they are guided safely back to the surface of the sea that floods Hyrule. The wish made by King Daphnis gives them a future by way of temporarily bending reality and breaking its laws. How is the King of Red Lions, someone who is not sufficient in all three virtues of the goddesses, still able to make a wish from the Triforce without it splitting? That answer reveals itself once you consider when the king touched the Triforce. The Triforce follows three rules that we know so far. The first rule is that a person must sufficiently have all three virtues of the goddesses before making their wish. Several Links in previous Zelda games went through trials and quests spanning an entire game in order to forge these virtues and make their respective wishes from the Triforce. We see in A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds, and Skyward Sword, as Link is able to make his wishes a reality after tempering his spirit in each game. The second rule is that if a person is deficient in any of these three virtues, the Triforce will split into three and harbor itself inside of three individuals who best embody those virtues. In the past, we always see the Triforce of Power rest within Ganon, the Triforce of Wisdom rest within Zelda, and the Triforce of Courage rest within Link. The third rule governing the Triforce is that after it has been split, someone must gather the pieces of that Triforce, whether by force or volition, and touch the Triforce, allowing that person who is not tempered to then make a wish, which is what King Daphnis was able to do in Wind Waker. There's actually a hidden fourth rule as well, that only came to light recently after watching the video made by Monster Maze explaining the Triforce and its properties. I will link in the description below. But a wish can actually be made without ever having to touch the Triforce. The chosen hero from the Sky era was able to make the first wish that we know of without touching the Triforce after it was first assembled. And Monster Maze actually argues that this could affect the magnitude of the wish granted by the Triforce, and I can't really disagree with that after watching his video. Now that you know why the Triforce is a big deal, we can discuss Hylia, or the goddess. Hylia was a goddess left in charge of protecting the Triforce by the Trinity goddesses. You can see her various statues littered throughout the Hyrule that is in Breath of the Wild. She did this by creating and using the blade of the goddess, what she called Fi. And before you go and correct me on the pronunciation of this, it's from the root of Latin. Fi actually means faithful in Latin, or loyal. The correct pronunciation when you put the vowel I at the end of anything in Latin is actually supposed to make an E sound instead of an I sound, which is known by another name, the Master Sword. Hylia defended Hyrule from the Demon Tribe, led by this guy, and sealed him away. However, the seal was impermanent, and the Demon King escaped, and Hylia was never allowed to use the Triforce to stop this bringer of demise. Given her divine status, Hylia had to make a decision that was not easy. She decided to shed her divinity and reincarnate as a human, losing all memories of her previous existence. This Hylian became known as the first Zelda. This Zelda would pass on the blood of the goddess, a heritage that can only be found within the royal bloodline seen in almost every Zelda game. It is why Zelda is always part of the royal family. It is also why the Zeldas of previous games can perform different magics like prophecy or telepathy, among other notable powers. In Breath of the Wild, she's capable of using the sealing magic that we see in this scene right here. The blood of the goddess, and consequently the divine power that comes with it, can only pass to other women within the royal family, who are all named Zelda out of royal tradition. The Zelda that we see in Breath of the Wild is the latest descendant of this bloodline, and she is desperately trying to discover and hone her magic before the return of the Calamity Ganon. In Skyward Sword, the first Zelda is aided by the chosen hero, the first Link, a boy who embodies what is known as the spirit of the hero. But each Link that we see in each Zelda game does not belong to a lineage. Each Link is different, and just like Zelda, has no memories of their previous lives. The first Link and the first Zelda are bound by a curse, placed on them by this figure, the bringer of demise, or as you probably know him, Demise. Demise curses them in such a way that his malice, or his hatred and resentment, would forever follow the spirit of the hero as well as the blood of the goddess. And because those entities reincarnate in the forms of Link and Zelda, well, so does the malice of Demise. This brings us to Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time introduces players to the split timeline, as well as Ganondorf. Ganondorf is not reincarnated, albeit in a different timeline, in each Zelda game following Ocarina of Time. The split timeline involves Ganondorf, the human form of the villain, and his demon form, Ganon, a pig-like demon form that symbolizes the villain's lust for power, being sealed away by Zelda at the end of Ocarina of Time. This Ganondorf comes back in the adult timeline in the events laid out in Wind Waker, and is defeated by a new Link. The Link from Ocarina of Time, who is aged 7 years in order to defeat this Ganondorf, is sent back 7 years in the past to his original timeline by the Zelda of the future. It is here when our hero is able to warn the princess about Ganondorf's intention to take over Hyrule. This timeline, when young Link warns young Zelda, is known as the Child Timeline. The Ganondorf we see here is the same Ganondorf who was sentenced to death in Twilight Princess. And this Ganondorf somehow wields the Triforce of Power moments before his scheduled end. This implies that the Triforce can somehow exist outside of the limitations established by the 3 rules I've previously mentioned. You see, because Ganondorf was only ever able to get a hold of the Triforce in Ocarina of Time when Link pulls the Master Sword from its place of rest, upon which the Triforce then splits into thirds. It's almost as if Ganondorf obtaining the Triforce of Power in the adult timeline allows him to also have it in the child timeline. Either that, or someone with deficiencies in the 3 virtues was able to acquire and then make a wish to the Triforce sometime before Ganondorf's execution, causing the Triforce to split, with the Triforce of Power going to Ganondorf in this timeline. Regardless of what happened, you only need to know that Ganondorf, and by default Ganon, is the same person in each Zelda timeline, and that the Triforce of Power allows him to come back. In the adult timeline, Ganondorf is sealed while still possessing the Triforce of Power. In the adult timeline, Ganondorf comes back twice. Once after the collapse of Hyrule Castle, and a second time during the beginning events of Wind Waker. In the child timeline, Ganondorf is revealed to have the Triforce of Power, and he escapes death, but is then sealed in the Twilight Realm. When this Ganondorf is finally bested by the Link and Zelda of Twilight Princess, he loses his Triforce of Power, and is thought to be dead, as signified by this scene. There's also the Fallen Hero timeline, where Ganon, during the final battle of Ocarina of Time, defeats Link and is then sealed by the Seven Sages, which then leads to the events of A Link to the Past, and onward down the line to the original Zelda and its sequel. We won't spend any time talking about this timeline. You just need to know that Ganon, not Ganondorf, is mostly referenced in this timeline, and now has the Triforce, which turned the Sacred Realm into the Dark World. Okay, so now you're caught up to Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is stated to take place at the end of the timeline. No distinction has ever been made beyond this, leaving fans like myself to obsess over when Breath of the Wild takes place and what is being reconciled to achieve that end. Regardless of the how, here's the what. Ganondorf, as far as we know, at the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom, does not have the Triforce. Nor does he have the Triforce of Power. The full Triforce appears to have been in possession of the royal family, as Zelda has the full Triforce seen here in this scene. It's important to note that all 3 triangles within the Triforce are lit up here. This is much different from previous titles, as we've only ever witnessed a third, and no more than a third, of the Triforce illuminated atop someone's hand before. And this is where Ganondorf's problem lies. No Triforce, specifically no Triforce of Power, means no resurrection for Ganondorf. The husk of a villain we once knew has not given up on reincarnation like translation errors from Breath of the Wild would lead you to believe. Instead, it's that he doesn't have the means to return, which for Ganondorf actually just means coming back from defeat, because we've never actually witnessed him reincarnate ever. This is why Ganondorf's malice is oozing, and then, like a geyser, shooting out of his body. Ganondorf without a means to return still has malice from demise, which was intended to follow the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero in a never-ending cycle. And this malice has nowhere to go. You might be wondering, what are the implications of this scenario? I explore some of these implications in the video I will post at the end of this one. I encourage you to look at that video for some more ideas. But I want to hear what you have to say. Are there any important base details worth mentioning that I have left out? Do you agree or disagree with this video, and why? Please comment below. Also, be sure to Triforce some clicks on that like button to promote this video, as well as that subscribe button if you would like to stay tuned for more content. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one.